Yes, and a very warm welcome to another episode of Messy and Masterful. Beautiful episode because of its number 70. I'm so happy we made it to number 70. I'm excited by number 70, but not overexcited because I know there is so much more to come. And on that note, before I introduce the next episode, I am very, very happy to announce that we will be interviewing on the 28th and the 29th of November. So later this month, we're November 15th today, as I am recording this. I will be interviewing some amazing people again at the World Innovation Summit for Education in Doha. I had an amazing time doing that 2 years ago. And I feel very honored and I'm very happy that I've been invited to come back and to interview loads of people. So we have loads of great content from the World Innovation Summit on education coming your way. The topic of this year is all around artificial intelligence in education and how humans can still flourish in an age of artificial intelligence. So that's going to make for some very, very interesting conversation. So I hope you will stay tuned and you will stay with us as these interviews are launched on our podcast. Moving on, I'm very happy to announce the next guest. His name is Dr. Charles Wiles. And Dr. Charles Wiles is quite an expert when it comes to technology. He earned an master's from the University of Cambridge in engineering and computer science, and then on top of that, a PhD from Oxford, focusing on computer science, robotics, and computer vision. He also did an MBA and was in between, I believe, the first ever product manager outside of the United States for Google. So that was quite a role and quite a title. He left Google to start his own company, which is an edtech company called Zish. And Charles and we speak a lot about his endeavor there. It was really great to listen to Charles as he shares his experiences and insights on working for technology companies and building them himself. And Charles is just a great guy who I think very, in a very grounded way, explains what drives him to ensure that his current entrepreneurial endeavor will become a big success. Check out the show notes if you want to know more about Dr. Charles Wiles or Zish. And for now, I hope you will enjoy episode number 70, Dr. Charles Wiles, the technology expert. Messy and masterful. In this podcast, we speak about the success of people who have achieved, built, or done something amazing, special, remarkable, noteworthy, and/or fabulous. Think of presidents, doctors, chefs, architects, filmmakers, writers, philosophers, CEOs, journalists, and the list goes on and on of people who've had a genuine impact on this world. But rather than underlining their career victories, we speak about the challenges they needed to overcome to actually get there. In each episode, we discuss 3 of such challenges, obstacles, difficulties, and/or hurdles with our guest, putting the messy of their lives next to the masterful. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Alder Bab and I'm so happy you could make it. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here. It is a great pleasure for me to have as our guest today Dr. Charles Wiles. Charles and we have known each other already for quite a while because I think we started around the same time setting up an edtech company. So we were both passionate about education from a completely different angle, but definitely both pioneers or trying to be pioneers, trying to be edtech founders. And it was always such a great pleasure to bump into Charles. Charles is a great guy. extremely, extremely clever. I'm jealous of how clever he is. And also a born entrepreneur. Charles, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been quite a long while since we last caught up, so I'm looking forward to this.
It has been. It has been. I wanted to mention that one of the things that I will always remember is when we were together in Austin at South by Southwest, and we had this EdTech pitch. So we all got like a ridiculous amount of time, like in terms of how short the time was. Like in a minute, we needed to kind of talk about our entire company and everything up and down. And I was very nervously working on it. And I think you had already done your pitching. You then sat next to me. It's like, rehearse it with me, take me through everything. And I was so grateful for the collegiality that you showed and kind of the peace and the tranquility you brought into it, demonstrating that it's all just kind of, a bit of a game. But I really appreciated that. And it calmed me down in kind of doing those pitches.
Quite happy to say so. Thank you. Yeah.
So on the record, I want to thank you for that. And you are the founder of Zish. And I want to talk all about Zish, but I also want to make sure that people know enough of you, because you are not only a kind of a great entrepreneur, but you're also a extremely well-educated doctor in robotics. Do I say that correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I like to think that I've had every privilege of education in life. I went to a good state secondary school, a very good state secondary school. I then went to Cambridge to do engineering. I then went and did a PhD at Oxford and an MBA at London Business School. I've had every opportunity. And, that's part of what got me into the space I am now. It's kind of like there are so many. I'm very well traveled. And I remember, being at a conference, a research conference in Mumbai, and being in this luxury 5-star hotel. And just across the road, literally across the road, is a kind of shanty town of kids and, doing the most, really poor people, and just thinking, I cannot sit here having had all these benefits in life and not try and make a difference to the millions of other people and children around the world who haven't had those benefits. And as you may well know, UNICEF reckon that roughly 2/3 of the world's young people leave school, leave education without having mastered basic levels of maths and literacy. So, for me, I've had those privileges and I've always wanted to give back.
That's amazing. And you did so, and we're going to talk about how you did that. You also are the first person hired by Google outside of the United States. Is that correct?
No, not
CV
quite.
marker. The first product
manager.
Oh, correct. There we go.
Outside of the United
good
States
enough.
by Google. Yes, I joined them in early 2005 in London. There were a couple of product managers in Zurich at the time, but they were they'd come from the States to set up an office in Zurich. So I was the first one hired outside the United States, and just really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But having an MBA and a PhD is the perfect CV for a Google product manager. They love that. And if you're in the States, there are lots of people with MBAs and PhDs actually, but in the UK and in Europe there aren't that many. So I was very lucky to be in the right place at the right time to get that gig.
Nice. And how long did you work for them?
I worked them for 4 years. I spent the first 2 years as a glorified business development person because there weren't any engineers in London at the time. And then we started to grow the mobile engineering team, which actually started off nothing to do with Android. But by the time I left, we were sort of working on Android when it was a secret project before anybody else in the world knew about it. And I remember having one of the very first Android mobile phones, which actually had a keyboard and sort of a fold-out keyboard on at the time. It was sort of very early on, and everything's changed, hasn't it? I mean, the world changed. It was such a transformational time with mobile technology.
It changes so quickly, everything, right? If I remember that was the gimmick with even having a mobile phone, let alone a smartphone, and then the little keyboards. BlackBerry being also so successful as it was, no one has a BlackBerry anymore. Kind of, all those things. So
there's a great movie came out last year on BlackBerry. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a really great movie. If you're interested in sort of like technology, entrepreneurship, and the rise and fall of great company, they fell off the back of the iPhone and Android, of course. But they were a super successful
Yeah.
mega company before that. For some of the younger viewers, they might not even know who BlackBerry was, but
Yeah.
fantastic movie to watch.
I recall seeing a trailer, but I forgot the name. Is the
I
name?
think it's called BlackBerry. I can't remember.
BlackBerry? Yeah, 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 that would be an obvious
Actually,
name.
I think it's
Yeah,
called
yeah,
BlackBerry. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Interesting. Well, first of all, we're going to discuss your challenges just like with any other guest. But you are now, of course, the CEO and founder of Zish. You have already been for going on almost 10 years now. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's been quite
So,
a long journey.
yeah. So tell us about Zish.
Yeah, so I founded Zish, yeah, roughly 10 years ago because my son was struggling at school. He was a smart lad, but he had a reading difficulty. Actually, he wasn't really diagnosed at the time. He was just a slow reader and slow writer. And he was just really struggling at school and sort of starting to fall behind. And one afternoon, I got a notification on my phone to say it was my turn to play Song Pop against my daughter. She was doing very well at school. And Song Pop was a mobile quiz game, one of the very earliest social mobile games. Every mobile game social now, right? But at that time, it was really innovative. My daughter had just answered 5 questions from this pop quiz. Now it was my turn to answer the same 5 questions and compare scores. And I just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could be doing this with my daughter, for a maths quiz or a history quiz or an English quiz, and wouldn't it be great if it was diagnosing my daughter's learning gaps? And wouldn't it be great if it was then recommending me things to do with my daughter? And actually, this would be amazing for my son because he really loves games. And wait a minute, why don't they do this in schools? Why don't, in the classroom, teachers run fun classroom quiz games, and the students love it, and they get real-time data, and they get to diagnose students' learning gaps, and do something about it. And so we thought that's what we do. I started the business with that goal in mind, and here we are 10 years later, and I'd say we're one of the top 5 global companies in that space, along with people like Kahoot, who you may know very well. I think they're the big £100 gorilla in the space now.
Nice. So it's basically you create customized quizzes, and on the back of those quizzes, you get an entire kind of diagnosis of where learning points for improvement are for the students. So new things to watch, new suggestions.
That's right. So the thing that differentiates us from our other, in the classroom quiz games space, that really differentiates us from other products in the category is that we've always focused on how do we use the game to give teachers the data so that they can then personalize their teaching, the data and tools. Whereas most of the others, they're really just about how do you just make learning fun.
Yeah.
Right. So we have some really great tools off the back of that data, and we're really keen that the teacher uses this data to personalize the teaching. We've been working hard on this for 10 years, but we're at a really exciting time now with the whole generative AI stuff going on, which allows us to suddenly make great leaps and strides in this space. So it's a really exciting time. We're talking about, the mobile phone and, the iPhone and the smartphone was one of the most transformational technology points in recent history, going back to, 2000 and probably 2008. We're at the same time again with generative AI, aren't we? We're at the time when amazing new companies are going to be launched, companies that are going to be, everybody's going to know about the new Googles and Facebooks of the world, and everything changes. Everything changes. And we'll look back at this time in 10 years' time and we'll go, do you remember when ChatGPT happened? And everything changed, because that's how transformational the moment we're in right now.
So you wouldn't be an advocate of, it's just a buzzword and all of a sudden, everyone, there's much to do about nothing.
Not at all. No. I can, without doubt, this is the most for me, in my view, this is the most transformational point in technology since the smartphone, and that was since before that it was the invention of the web browser.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the once in a decade revolutionary moment that transforms the whole nature of business. New winners, new losers, completely new market segments open up. But for us in the edtech space, it's super exciting because ultimately, I always think of AI and generative AI as something that saves people time, right? And teachers are some of the most time poor people on the planet, So in this particular space, it really is a very exciting time.
I'm just going to dive into that further because I want our listeners to kind of know why that is, because AI isn't new. We've been talking about AI for a while, And then all of a sudden there's Chat GPT. I think, and everyone all of a sudden gets it. Like, there's this machine giving you very extensive answers to questions that you have, and you can apply it on all levels. Whereas before, kind of, it's not that it came overnight. It was already there. It's just like, for me, it's almost that the packaging is different all of a sudden, and that's why a lot of us wake up to it.
I think,
Also,
yeah.
or am I seeing this wrong?
No. I mean, I think it's obviously, it feels like a sudden change, but it's not. It's been something which has been going on for a long while. And I think it's just suddenly got to a point where it works well enough in the general case to make a difference across many different categories. So interestingly, I mean, when I was doing my PhD in, when was it, 1993 or something like that, 1992, was when the very first research papers in neural networks were being published, right? And then I did my MBA many years later, and I was doing a course on educational strategy. And I remember the professor saying about how there's this almost Moore's law-like law that says that when things first come out of the research labs, it seems to be almost 30 years before they suddenly become real commercial successes. And it's kind of almost exactly 30 years from that 1992, 93 times to now. It's kind of uncannily accurate. She also said that there's always a period in the middle of that where people try and launch great companies and many fail because it's not quite good enough yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're seeing the same thing with virtual reality and augmented reality, but there's this. So it's quite an interesting thing. If you're thinking about being a technology entrepreneur, maybe this more. It's not Moore's law. Moore's law is obviously a different law, but maybe this kind of empirical law that says, when do those research papers first start coming out in the research labs, and has 30 years passed? Because if it is, you're probably in a good time to be starting a business. If you're sort of one of those people trying to do it after 15 years, you're probably going to find that it's not going to quite work. It's just one of those empirical rules. But of course, what has really changed recently is what people call general purpose AI, isn't it? That's what ChatGPT is. A lot of the AI up until ChatGPT was really, really good, but it was very specific purpose. I mean, like if you've got an Amazon Alexa or one of these things, the AI behind the scenes that is doing that language recognition, I mean, is fantastic, right? And that sort of came into play about 10 years ago, right? And that really is amazing technology, but it's very specific purpose. We're taking speech and translating it into language and instructions. What ChatGPT has been able to do is it's been able to be applied to many different domains. It's been used for things nobody ever thought about when they were designing it and building it. And that's what makes it so exciting. And actually for us, almost every day we realize something more we can do with it. The more you get into it, I mean, if any of your listeners are listening to this and they haven't tried ChatGPT, they should just go and try it. Mm-hmm. And the more you use it, the more ideas you have on how to use it.
Yeah.
And I think we're still on the cusp. I mean, we're still on we're still on the ground zero of what's going to be possible on this kind of stuff. It's not like, we're at the end game. We're at the start. So I 100% can tell you this is a game-changing moment, and it's probably bigger than most people realize.
And so what would you say to people that do realize that it's big, but they see the doom and the gloom of AI is going to take over and we're going to be slaves to AI soon as humanity?
Well, for a long time there's been this concept of the singularity, which is the point at which computers become as intelligent as humans. And at that point, they're able to build computers that are more intelligent than them. And so you get this exponential growth in intelligence. This is known as the singularity. The singularity may or may not come. Who knows, right? We're still a long way from, computers having the same level of intelligence as humans and taking over the world. I mean, maybe the singularity is 5 years away. Maybe it's 50 years away. Maybe it's 500 years away. Who knows? But there'll certainly be losers in, sort of like in commercial terms. There'll certainly be jobs that disappear because it's no longer necessary for people to do them. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, it will open up all sorts of new opportunities. It's all about making things that more efficient, isn't it? Right? We're not there yet, but let's take AI for driving trucks, right? At some point in the not too distant future, we will have AI capable of driving trucks. And I think, truck drivers make up 4% of the US workforce or something. So at that point, their job starts to become redundant. But those people have other jobs, other opportunities will open up, other and more hopefully more creative and higher level thought jobs open up
Yeah.
that they can then take on. So, I mean, there will be some occupations that become redundant, but overall society, I think, will be massive winners, because it's all about being more efficient, being able to do more things faster, quicker, and better. And that's what AI is really about. It's about
Yeah.
efficiency and saving time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it also from the job loss angle. You hear now, of course, so many other theories of, AI will be in charge. You will be led by an AI machine, not by a person. Also, the confusing bits of that we're no longer looking at humans, but at an AI engine. Like if where we now watch videos on YouTube, that it's going to be completely an AI generated little instructional video, or a politician says something that he or she has not said, because it's AI driven. So all the confusion that it brings along, is it AI or is it real? And that we can't really
Yeah.
say anymore.
Yeah. I mean, we already
Yeah.
suffer from fake news, don't we? And now people can do deep fakes. So they can make
Yeah.
politicians say things that they didn't say, and it can look 100% real. I mean, I think, you are right. In some ways, fake news will be compounded by these kind of things. But fake news has been around for a while, long before AI, hasn't it? So,
Yeah.
I think we all have to learn and be wise. I mean, there have been, as you're probably aware, there have been cases of people claim to have kidnapped people's children, and the parent thinks they're talking to the child, but it's actually an AI
Yeah.
voice
Yeah.
generated version of the child, and but
Oh
it
God.
sounds so realistic that the parent is convinced it's their child has been
Oh
kidnapped,
my God.
and actually their child is safely at school and hasn't been kidnapped at all. So
Yeah.
there will always be, and I think that's true of any new technology. There will always be nefarious uses for it.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely well on the side of it's going to be far more of a power for good than a power for bad. I mean,
Yeah.
I was talking to teachers about students using it in the, to write essays and things like that. I'm sure when the calculator came out, or maybe even the slide rule, teachers said, oh, now children are going to cheat at maths, right?
Yeah.
But actually, the calculator is an incredibly important tool that allows people in the real world to be much more effective in when they're doing calculations, right? And so
Yeah.
we would never dream of not teaching children how to use calculators.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will be teaching children how to use these tools for good and for proper purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. My theory is we have created it. We are able to kind of make sure it's put to good use. But for that, you first need to flesh out as you say, the nefarious cases, kind of, people who use it for bad. And for that, we need arbitrage. We need, someone who says, well, no, we're not going to use it for this. It won't be applied for that. So it's a whole new ball game. Like it's whether it's on a policy level or on a usage level or whatever. And I agree with you that it will change the way we deal with things, right? Like the internet changed things, like so many other things. I think this is the next level.
It definitely needs to be monitored, and I think there definitely will be cases where policy will need to come into play.
Yeah.
But you've also got to recognize it's out of the box, isn't it? Right. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Let's go and talk a little bit about you and your personal challenges, because other than your great, entrepreneurial journey, of course, didn't come together without its struggles. And thank you, because you also shared them beforehand with me. The first one is actually kind of, being a founder of companies or working for Google, or then before that, London Business School and whatever, and then Cambridge and Oxford, your PhD. But then at the same time, of course, also being a father to two wonderful children, and of course being on the crossroads of a professional and personal life. And then with you, of course, the tragic loss of your ex-wife, leaving you, with raising both your teenage children by yourself. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm just giving it like we discussed it beforehand. Could you talk us a little bit about, how you navigated in such an undoubtedly very difficult period?
It's really interesting. So, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. About 2 years into this journey with this venture, my ex-wife sadly passed away from cancer, and we were already divorced, but we shared looking after the children and things. And now I had the children 100% of the time, all the time. And I think they were 12 and 14 at the time. So they were, relatively young. And of course, you're trying to build a business, and running a business is something that requires a lot of hours. And, if anybody ever thinks that, they're starting a business because they're going to have more free time and they're going to be in control, and they believe the myth of the 4-hour work week, etc. If that's what you're starting a business for, don't do it. You're going to be working super hard. So now I'm working super hard and I'm having to bring up 2 kids. So, for me, it was get up, take the kids to school at 8:30, get on a train to London. That was an hour and a half commute because I'd had to move into my ex-wife's house, and which wasn't particularly convenient for getting to London. Work a full day there, leave at about 6. Get home about 7:30. Cook for the kids, help with their homework. It'd be like 10 p.m. Then I'd sit down to do some more work until midnight, and then repeat. And I suppose perhaps the more interesting point is that if you are, married and in a relationship and you have children, you're trying to start a business, it can be quite stressful. You can it can lead to arguments with your partners, about the time you're investing and, your support. But just remember, if something happens to one of you, it's going to be 10 times harder. Be very thankful that you've got somebody to share that experience with. Be thankful that you've got somebody who is there to support you in your venture. Super important, of course, to have their support. If you're trying to start a business without your partner's support, that's going to be an incredible struggle too. Yeah. Your partner needs to be 100% bought in. But ultimately, you have no choice. You just get on and do it, right? You don't sit back and moan about it. You just get on and you do it, and you put in the hours, you put in the time. The one really good benefit of it is, I was probably that dad that was not giving my kids enough time, right? I would be late home. I would be, working out weekends. If my kids wanted to come play with me, maybe I'd get a little bit tetchy and say, oh, no, I can't play with you now because I'm busy working on this stuff. The silver lining was I got to spend a lot of time with my children when they were growing up. Every day, because I was the one who was bringing them up, and at the weekends I was the one taking care of them. So, that allowed me to have much more time with my children than I would probably have had otherwise while they were growing up. And again, I recommend, if you are an entrepreneur and you do have children, it's important to make time for them. Don't spend years working weekends and things and not putting that time and effort into bringing up your kids, because it goes very quickly, and before you know it, they'll be grown up and they'll have left. So do make time for them.
Nice. Yeah, no, I hear you every step of the way. Before I share my observations, I'm just curious what it was like for your children. It must have been so difficult for them as well, like all of a sudden being thrown into such a situation, let alone the emotional backlash for them of, it disrupted their world enormously at 12 and 14, no?
Absolutely. So my daughter was quite resilient, and I mean, obviously it was a very sad experience for her, but she largely got through it quite well. My son, I mean, apart from, as we were saying, he was already struggling at school through his reading difficulties, but he had a lot of anxiety problems and depression problems through his teens. That was very challenging. There's some stories I can't share about some of the things we went through then, but it is not easy. But I mean, I think, do you know what? I think if you're a parent bringing up teenagers, I think if your children go through their teens without some major issues, you've been incredibly lucky. I mean, obviously in our case, the mother dying was terrible, but you can have a perfect family background and teens can go through some terrible times. Yeah. And I think you sit there and you start asking yourself, have I been a good parent? What have I done things wrong? What have I done wrong? And what could I have done differently? But don't second guess yourself. You are a great parent. No matter how good a parent you are, teens can have, you can have some real challenges with teens as they go through that period. And, just keep being a great parent you are and doing the job that you do, because it isn't easy.
It's the consistency as well for them, because being a teenager is all about exploring and, going on an emotional excursion and whatever more. So you need to be consistent. Like, listen, still that, and we're still eating at 6 or 7 or whatever it is.
I think the stats on young people and mental health problems are awful, aren't they? I'm not going to second guess what they are because I can't remember what they are, but, the number of children in school who have mental health issues, and I mean, we're on a global basis, we're probably quite good, but really we're awful in providing the support to young people with mental health problems. Like there's the charitable organisations, they have waiting lists of years, not just months. We need to do so much more to support the mental health of young people.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, that's going to be a different interview if we really dive into that. So let's not. But I do thank you for sharing, and I do thank you for sticking with it and kind of growing. And then now let's go to your venture, because you've written down as kind of your venture when you started it, you weren't aware that it was going to be such a long game. And
that's right. I mean, I remember saying to my original co-founder, who, in 3 years we're going to sell this business for 50 million or more. And we believed it. Yeah. And after 3 years, we were probably worth, I don't know, 4 or 5 million. And we were still a long way from being in a position to exit the business and do whatever you want to do when you sell your business. But he, as a result, decided to quit and start another business, which also failed. But I kept going year after year after year. And I think, that's something you have to recognize when you're starting a business. Sure, some people get super lucky. They get on a rocket ship and they do just the right thing. But actually, for the vast majority of businesses, it's a long game. It's about dedication, perseverance, resilience. When things go wrong, getting up, spending a whole day, doing that day in, day out, not for 3 years, but 5, 10 years. And, it's a long game, and you have to have that real dedication, resilience. Actually, I think Steve Jobs says it best. He says, starting a business, any business, but, particularly a technology business, is so hard and it takes so much effort. If you are not absolutely passionate about what you're doing, you will give up. So if you're thinking of starting a business, don't start it because you think it's going to be a better lifestyle. Don't start it because you think you're going to make a lot of money. Start it because you are so passionate about it. You have no choice but to start this business, right?
Yeah.
It is your reason. It is your purpose to be there and start it. Yeah. Because if you start it for any other reason, you'll probably fail because you'll give up. It'll be too hard.
So you've been doing this for 10 years now. What's your secret to your resilience? What makes you get up in the morning saying, okay?
First of all, I am just super passionate about what we do. I mean, the best days I have is when a teacher tells me about some student whose life we've changed. And I got one of those emails last week from one of our teachers, actually. We get them from time to time, or I'm having a call with them. And, that just makes everything worthwhile. Just one student whose life you've changed, who was failing at school and who's now succeeding and happy and enjoying learning. And I mean, and I know that for every time a teacher tells us about this, there are 10, 20, 100 who we've done the same thing for. That's the main thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. The second thing is, I'm a fighter. I never give up, right? It's like, and the harder things get, the harder I work.
Yeah.
The more my back is against the wall, the more I'm going to come out swinging. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think you have to have that kind of mentality. You've got to have the, when the chips are down, that's when you really get going.
So this is a nice bridge into your last challenge, because, while we were discussing, I really like how you typified that. You said that you are an entrepreneur by personality, rather than, waking up with this great idea. Of course, this is a great idea, but there are people that just are an entrepreneur by accident, that say, I'm going to do this because this is profitable. And, whereas you were more like, it was almost in your DNA, right?
That's right. When I was an undergraduate at Cambridge, I was actually the president of the Cambridge University Young Entrepreneurs Society.
Oh, there you go.
And you might think that, given how popular tech entrepreneurship is these days, that was a big society. But it had 30 people, and probably 25 of them were only doing it because it would help them get a job as a management consultant or a merchant banker when they finished Cambridge. So there were probably like 5 people with a real interest in entrepreneurship back in the late, the early 90s in Cambridge University. I mean, it's crazy if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So I always had this passion for entrepreneurship, and I chose to do a PhD in robotics and AI because I thought this would be this great opportunity to do exciting things and build great companies out of it.
Mm.
Actually, obviously, I don't do robotics and AI per se anymore. I mean, now, yes, we're doing it again, but obviously, I've moved into the edtech space, and I've moved through various technology space over the years in that desire to find that business. And actually, the actual problem with doing a robotics and AI there was kind of, I didn't realize it at the time, but was this 30-year problem, right?
Yeah.
If you go and do a PhD in something today, the chances are that research is going to become properly commercial 30 years later.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So it's not that people won't try, and people will try, and some people will be successful. Don't get me wrong, right? There are many sort of university spin-outs and people that, who've been very successful. So obviously it does happen, but there was no straightforward journey from me doing my PhD to launching a company. I continued to do research for some other big companies, and it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years after finishing my PhD that I went into my first entrepreneurial venture as a chief scientist. Mm-hmm. That I initially really enjoyed, but then I actually started to get frustrated because as a technologist, I found that the founders, I wasn't, I was like the number 4 in the company, and the founders and other people didn't take my business opinions, my commercial views seriously, because I was a technologist, right? I didn't know anything about business. I thought I did. I mean, I didn't, but I thought I did. So I then decided to go and do an MBA because I wanted to get that business training.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're entrepreneurially minded and you're thinking of doing an MBA, I'm certainly very happy that I took that decision. But there are pros and cons. Doing an MBA will give you a lot of good general knowledge. Would I have been better off spending those 2 years trying to start a company and learning from actually doing it hands-on? Maybe, rather than doing a general purpose MBA. But the real great thing from doing the MBA was the network that I built. And I think that is one of the most important things for success as an entrepreneur, which is, it's one of the hidden success factors, isn't it, Aldo, which is your network. You have to have a great idea, obviously. You have to work super hard, obviously. But there's a lot of serendipity through connections that happens when you're growing a business. And having those networks are absolutely massive. I mean, there's so many little serendipitous points that have come across in my journey. Now, obviously, I've been super lucky. I've got my Cambridge network, my Oxford network, my London Business School network, my Google network. I mean, amazing networks. I'm super, super lucky. Yeah. But you can build your networks. It's about getting out there. It's about going out there, networking, going to networking events, meeting people. And actually, one of the interesting things I learned when I was doing my MBA, I always hated networking, to be honest. I was very lucky in where I'd come from, but I hated going to networking events and meeting people and schmoozing and all of that. And I went to a sort of a personal development session at London Business School. You could sign up to these, and it was on networking, and it taught me something which, to this day, I think is one of the most valuable things I ever learned, which is, when you're going to meet somebody for the first time, whether it's just because you happen to bump into them or you're going to meet them, it's been something which has been planned for 6 months, go in with the attitude, not what can that person do for me, but what can you do for them, right? Find out about them, find out about what they're trying to do with their lives and their careers. And then think about who are all the people you know and what is the stuff that you know and how can I be helpful for that person? Who can I introduce them to, right? Never be shy about making those introductions. I sometimes get on calls with people and I know they know people that I'd like to be introduced with. Sometimes ask them. People are always very, very, keep their connections close to their chest and they won't introduce you to these people. I'm completely opposite. If you know that I know somebody that you want to be introduced to, tell me and I will do my best to introduce you to them.
I do the same. I don't. First of all, I think that people are intelligent enough to make a decision, on their own whether they want to talk to someone, yes or no, right? So if you're in the middle, you can facilitate. You can say, well, I can show you the way to a person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this person will give you all of their time and energy and whatever, right? Those are two completely different things. But I do like the facilitation and trying to make the connection because you never know what comes out of it. I also think life's just too short to be too, to be too economic with your connections. It's like, trying to
And the really nice thing
keep
is
doors
people
closed.
remember that you were helpful, right? People
Yeah,
remember that you made those connections and you
yeah,
get recognized as though it wasn't one of those people. And people come to you and they thank you and they appreciate it. And then
yeah.
they come back to you and say, they introduce you to people when they suddenly make that connection. And so, it comes back. So that's what I really learned in that one little session, which I think is one of the most important life lessons. When you meet
Nice.
people, think what you can do for them, not what they can do for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like that. I like that. And I try to live by that as well. And that also gives me energy, right? That gives me energy when connecting people and when going to these networks or networking or whatever you call it, trying to help out. We're at our last minutes of the interview because talking about networking, you have a big conversation right after this. But before we do, I would like to ask you two questions that I ask each of my guests. The first one is about reading. So, throughout your career, has there been a book, or perhaps multiple books, or perhaps an author that stuck with you that you would highly recommend to others to read?
Gosh, well, I mean, yeah, so many books. I mean, obviously, read. I mean, obviously, there are many other sources of information these days, like YouTube. Sucking information. I mean, my favorite book as a child was The Hobbit. I don't know if that's particularly helpful to anybody, but it's just such a wonderful book, isn't it? My favorite sort of like semi non-fiction book as an adult was a Japanese book called Taiko, which is about a farm boy who actually becomes one of the most important feudal leaders in Japan in the 1800s. And it's just a fantastic story, very, very important. Very few people in the West know it, but it's a very well known in Japanese culture. And there's a great book on that. From a business perspective, I mean, in some ways it's not the greatest book, but there's the Think and Grow Rich, which was written, I don't know, 80, 100 years ago now. And Napoleon Hill was the first guy to try and encode what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And arguably, in the 100 years of past, nobody's actually done any better because obviously it takes all sorts of different types of people to, succeed. There is no one, there is no one magic sort of set of ingredients that works. But what he was saying was, if you want to be successful, you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
Right? Success doesn't, from the vast majority of people anyway, doesn't just come by chance. You have a plan, and plan big, and discount all the paths that you might take that won't get you to your destination, because there are many sort of incremental things that which will get you closer, but they won't get you there in the end. You've got to sort of work out a plan. You've got to be ambitious and courageous and brave and have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to get there. So have a plan. But one of the other ones he says is that if you're going to create a business, a successful business, you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to stand on the shoulders of giants. So, if you really want to have a successful business, of course, you're a key person and your thoughts and your ideas are going to be a major driver. But really, it's the people that you build around you. It's your team, your co-founders, your lieutenants, the people. They're the ones who are really going to build the business.
Yeah.
So remember you're standing on the shoulder of giants, and recruit those amazing people. It's a lot harder than you think to find great people. So, it takes time and effort. Invest in finding those amazing people that you're going to build your business with.
Nice. That's a beautiful recommendation. Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. Is that
correct? Yeah. An oldie book.
We'll be sure to include it in our show notes. Charles, thank you so much for your time. Very last question. Now it's your podcast, the Charles Wiles podcast. Who would be your first guest?
Oh, who would be my first guest? Gosh, that's
your first guest, or who would be your number one guest?
Do you know what? I mean, I'd love to have somebody like Tim Cook on it. I'd love to be interviewing one of these tech leaders. Obviously, I was very lucky to once get the opportunity to meet Steve Jobs when he was visiting Google, and we were talking about Android and iPhones at the time. But I think he's done an incredible job taking over at Apple and just taking it'd be amazing to get some more insight from somebody like him, wouldn't it?
Nice. Well, Tim Cook, let's make it happen. The Charles Charles Wiles Zish podcast. Charles, thank you so much for your time. It's been an inspiring conversation. If people want to know more about Zish or Quizalize, then they can go to our show notes and find out more about the company as well as Charles' adventures into all of this. I wish you all the very, very best on your entrepreneurial journey further. And come back anytime. Thanks so much,
Thank you
Charles.
so much, Howard. It's been a great pleasure, and it's always wonderful to catch up with you. Thank you.
If you liked this episode, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Philip Anderson for our beautiful theme music. This episode was edited by Natalie Piles with production assistance from Genta Metalia.